Hello, I'm Allyson Malik. I'm the director for the Oak Bluffs Public Library, and today we're standing in front of the home of Steve Auerbach. Steve is a longtime Oak Bluffs resident and volunteer extraordinaire for the library, the Island Food Pantry, and many other places. And today we're going to have a garden tour of the many various plants that Steve has collected in his property since the mid-1980s. Come on, let's go meet Steve.
Hi there, I'm Steve Auerbach. I live here at 45 Nashawena Park in Oak Bluffs, and I'm giving a garden tour of my many plants that I started with my father when we first bought this house in the late 80s, and some things have grown a lot in that time. The whole property is anchored by this gigantic oak tree, which dates, I don't know when, probably 75 or 100 years old. It's one of the largest, I think, in Oak Bluffs. But it's also a giant pain each winter as I have to rake up many thousands of leaves. But right now it's beautiful. One of the plants that gets the most comment as people walk by, if you look right here on the sidewalk, there's two Cactus Pad cactus. Botanical name is Opuntia, and people say, how can they be here on the island? Well, they're hardy throughout most of the country, and they bloom dozens or maybe hundreds of yellow flowers just before the 4th of July. I'm going to start walking around the house. I'm very fond of needle evergreens because they give one beauty the entire year. So back in '88, my dad and I planted a number of them. You might call it the foundation planting, and they have matured. For example, this beautiful Hinoki Cypress on the corner. Well, I guess we're going to walk this way. On this end of the property, on the Yonkers Avenue end, is a very nice red Japanese maple. Next to it is one of my favorites, the umbrella pine, whose botanical name I can never pronounce correctly, Sciadopitys, something like that. But it's umbrella-like needles, that is, they all emerge from the same spot, are actually quite soft. The plant can grow 30 or 40 feet tall. There are some wonderful examples of it at Poly Hill Arboretum, which in many ways is my inspiration, because they have an unparalleled variety of foliage. Continuing over this way, I did have a Thunderhead Pine over here, which is a Japanese black pine, but it grew too large, and I got rid of it. So the front part of this side of the house is a work in progress. You can see the orange flowering Tithonia or Mexican sunflower. They're just an annual, and the monarch butterfly seems to like it. An annual, but the vibrant orange flowers are really eye-catching. Here is a Vitex, another plant inspired by Poly Hill, which has an astounding one. Vitex is very late to leaf out in the spring, but its blue flowers are a welcome addition in August. Okay, now we come to one of my favorite of the evergreens, a weeping hemlock. It does get woolly adelgid, which I have to spray with a fine oil several times each spring, but it's so lacy and soft looking. I think it's worth the effort. It's grown quite a bit in 32 years. Next to the weeping hemlock is a bird's nest spruce and one of the smoke bushes. This one doesn't flower particularly well, but its color contrasts well with the greens all around it. And finally, on the back corner here is another Hinoki Cypress. The botanical name for those is Cactus Pad, and they're probably my favorite genus of evergreens. They don't require pruning. They have a naturally beautiful form. Another Cactus Pad I admire is this one back here next to the telephone pole, Weeping Alaskan Cedar. Unusual drooping shape. I must have planted that one about 12 years ago. It's hard to remember. Again, it requires really no maintenance. Back here is my main perennial bed, though I put a beautiful spreading Deodar Cedar in this back corner, which as it grows will overtake some of its neighbors probably. But that's the nature of landscape gardening. Things are always changing and you have to make adjustments. Things start to bloom in this perennial bed, probably late April, early May. So many things are past. The globe thistle 10 days ago were a beautiful vibrant blue. Now they're past, and I wait until next July for their color to show off. And next to them is a crepe myrtle, one of my very favorites, although it has no sign of bud yet. It's a very vibrant dark pink when it blooms. Full moon maple is an interesting, it's kind of a semi-dwarf. I don't know if I would call it a Japanese maple, but the leaf shape is beautiful. Here's our vegetable garden, which as usual has been a mixed success. The broccoli and cauliflower all got eaten. On the other hand, we had a good harvest of peas, and the potatoes are looking really good. Tomatoes are okay. I just got a new load of compost, so as usual we'll be adding that to improve our vineyard sandy soil. The eggplants are coming along. Behind the vegetable garden is one of our 3 patches of asparagus. It's great to be able to pick your own asparagus for the whole month of May, but then you have to allow it to grow to the maturity of its wispy foliage and cut it back down in the fall to await next year's crop. Some highlights over here include the Weeping Blue Atlas Cedar. I work on that constantly to enhance its color and try to keep it growing out, and it's really a showstopper, I think. That's why I have a couple of statues below it. Behind Allyson is our shed, which has a Autumn Clematis or Clematis growing on it. Pretty fragrant white flowers, probably in September. And a developing weeping white pine. Over here are a couple of interesting maples. You should take a close-up of the bark. This one is the paper bark maple. As time goes by and the bark develops, the peeling bark becomes showier and showier. And on the other side, across from it, is a coral bark maple. That's a beautiful dwarf plant, which gives real nice interest in the winter after the leaves have fallen and the red color of the branches shows up beautifully. Behind them are more Cactus. These are called gold thread cypress. Believe it or not, my dad and I planted them in 1988. They were probably 15 inches high, and there was another layer of evergreens behind them, most of which are now gone. I pruned those gold threads for the first time last month because they seem to be catching up to the coral bark maple. Over along this side of the property, I just put that Japanese maple in. I think it's called orangeade. The leaves emerge with a distinctive orange color in spring. There's a butterfly bush, of course. And I found a purple flowering tree peony that I have great hopes for. It isn't much right now, but let's wait a few years and see what happens. And over here, and I can't think of the botanical name, inspired again by Polyhill Arboretum. This is in the pea family, and it's covered with little pink blossoms in September. Then you have to cut it back down to the ground in the winter, only to watch it miraculously emerge in the spring and grow to this large size in one season. This is an interesting area over here. Until 3.5 years ago, there was a native pine standing in the middle which shaded this entire bed, which is why I planted certain plants of the rhododendron family around it. In the windstorms we had that year, the pine just fell over dead, and the plants have gone through a lot of changes now in full sun. I'm not going to show you the ones that have suffered from sunburn and drought, this terrible droughty summer, but I planted a couple of new trees in the center, a Cusa dogwood and a Stewartia acquired from Polly Hill. The Stewartia started suffering from the lack of rainfall and has lost a good percentage of its leaves. But I've got hopes that with regular watering and a return of some rainfall, it will come back and eventually provide the shade that some of the other plants need. Among the plants in here are the little known but very useful relative of rhododendrons called Leucothwi. Rhodies, of course. Oakleaf hydrangeas, which I've only recently cut back. They looked really nice a month ago. Over here are some interesting plants. The tallest one is an oxydendron, aka sourwood. It's a small tree. You can see at the top are many clusters of white flowers. Not all that exciting, but there they are. One of the best parts of oxydendron is its fall color, brilliant red. So we have that to look forward to in October. Highlighting the center of this bed is my Weeping Norway spruce, a plant that I've propped up because its natural habit is to be prostrate, but I think it looks cool, like maybe a prehistoric elephant or something, the way it is. It's flanked by 2 flowering bushes. Again, I forget the name. That's what happens when you're 73. Begins with an A. They should be used more often because their flowering lasts quite a long time. There's work involved, of course, cutting things back, trying to keep them the shape you want them to be. Finally, we get back to the front of the house, and my favorite annuals are on either side of me. Zinnias, I like the variety known as Bennery Giants. They're not prone to getting mildew, a disease which ruins the foliage of many otherwise beautiful zinnias. But Bennerys are much less prone, and they just keep on flowering. The larger bed is over here. And in front of that bed, I created a dry garden that has lots of sedum and a few euphorbias gotten from Vineyard Gardens about 5 years ago, because I could never keep a lawn here. the sedums have done very, very well. And where there's a hole kind of thing, I throw in Vinca rosea, one of my other favorite annuals. There's a gold-colored Cypress, a Weeping Larch. This is one of the few deciduous evergreens. In other words, it's going to drop its needles in November or so, and looks like sticks for the entire winter, then gets a new crop of needles each spring. And a couple of heathers covering the ground. Heathers are cool because they flower in January, February, March, when everything else is seemingly dead. Also in this front area, I have several tree peonies and combination tree and herbaceous peonies. The large one back there behind our little lighthouse gets dinner plate size pink flowers. They're very impressive in May. Some of these plants have suffered from the drought. I can only water so much, so often. Watering with a hose is not nearly as effective as a full day of rain. I suppose the final plant we'll look at is the shredded umbrella plant. Another strange one that I acquired from the Arboretum. So I guess I should add that along the edge of the road are a lot of perennials, including balloon flower, Coreopsis moonbeam, black-eyed Susans, which invade everywhere, some beautiful bearded iris. There's a very handsome goldenrod right here, hasn't flowered yet, but of necessity I've not been able to water any of this, so it hasn't performed this year nearly as well as it would have if we had had a little rain. But there's always next year. You can see the remnants of the Coreopsis moonbeam. There's a little phlox still blooming and a couple of balloon flowers, but without any rain, it's kind of a wait till next year. Of course, it's a lot of work. It all has to be cut back in the winter, but that's what gardening is all about. So all I have to do is sit here and direct the gods to take care of the plants, and my wish is its command.
Okay, so what really happens though?
What really happens is that, well, when it's hot, I take an hour or two first thing in the morning and prune or water, a lot of watering this summer. Weed, the usual, cut things back. I've gotten a few battery-powered machines that are wonderful. I recommend them highly. They're not nearly as noisy as your typical gas-powered ones. The company is known as E-Go, spelled E-G-O, and I got a hedge trimmer, I got a blower, and the lawnmower, all battery powered. Wonderful. So I guess we're out here anywhere from 1 to 3 hours per day. It's a hobby, it's a passion, and it's a burden. And I sometimes think about when I'm gone, how are our daughters going to deal with this? But I guess that'll be for them to figure out. Okay.